I want to tell you something strange today, something that never really made sense to me for the longest time. Because everyone, and I mean everyone, your therapist, your grandmother, that self-help guru on your feed, they all say the same thing. Talking to yourself is a sign something is wrong with you. Keep it inside. Keep it quiet. Do not let anyone catch you doing it. And I used to believe that too, honestly. I used to lower my voice if I caught myself muttering something out loud in the kitchen. But here is the thing that kept nagging at me, the thing I could not shake. If talking to yourself is so strange, then why do the highest performing athletes on earth do it constantly, out loud on camera, in front of millions of people? Why do elite surgeons do it mid-operation? Why do the calmest, most grounded people you have ever met, the ones who never seem to panic, do it more than anyone else? Something did not add up, so I looked into it, and what I found, what the research actually shows, what the neuroscience reveals, is that talking to yourself out loud every single day is not a symptom of anything broken. It is one of the most powerful tools the human brain has ever discovered, and almost nobody is using it on purpose. Stick with me, because by the end of this, you are going to understand exactly why, and exactly how to use your own voice to change your own mind, starting tonight. Before I go further, if this is the kind of thing that fascinates you, the hidden mechanics behind how your own mind works, do me a favor and subscribe here on Smart Psychology, because this channel exists for exactly this reason, to pull back the curtain on the ordinary things you do every day that are actually extraordinary once you understand them. Now let me start with a simple question. What is a thought, really? We throw the word around like we understand it completely, but think about it for a second. A thought is not a solid thing sitting in your skull waiting to be admired. A thought is more like a flicker, a burst of electrical activity that appears, does its job in a fraction of a second, and vanishes before you can even fully grasp it. Thousands of these flickers move through your brain every single hour, most of them unexamined, most of them unfinished, most of them just noise. And here is where it gets interesting. Here is where the whole idea that silent thinking is enough starts to fall apart. When you think silently in your head, without saying a word out loud, you are using a much smaller, much faster, much less organized part of your brain. It is quick, but it is sloppy. Thoughts overlap, worries loop. One anxious thought triggers another anxious thought, and before you know it, you are spiraling, and you cannot even remember what started it. This is why silent rumination, the kind everyone does at 3 a.m. staring at the ceiling, almost never solves anything. It just spins. But something remarkable happens the moment you say a thought out loud, even just to yourself, even in an empty room. The instant you convert that flicker of electricity into actual sound waves coming out of your own mouth, your brain has to do something. It does not have to do with silent thought. It has to organize the idea into language your own ears can understand. It has to slow down, it has to sequence its subject, then verb, then object, cause, then effect. This process is called externalization, and it activates a completely different network in your brain, the same network responsible for logic, for structure, for stepping outside a problem and looking at it from above instead of drowning inside it. Researchers have a name for this too. They call it self-distancing. And one of the clearest studies on this comes from a psychologist named Ethan Kross, who found that people who talk to themselves using their own name and using the word you instead of I actually performed better under stress, felt calmer, and recovered faster from anxiety than people who just thought silently in the first person. Saying, "Sarah, you can handle this," out loud, works differently in your brain than thinking, "I can handle this," silently. It is almost like your brain treats the version of you speaking as a coach, and the version of you listening as the player who needs the advice. And once you understand that, you realize you have had a built-in coach living inside you this entire time, and you just never turned the microphone on. Let me tell you about a man. I will not use his real name. Let us call him Mark. Mark was 44, an accountant, the kind of guy who prided himself on staying logical, staying composed, never one of those people who talks to themselves like a crazy person on the street. He used to actually judge people who did that, quietly, in his head, of course. Then his company went through a round of layoffs, and Mark survived, but 3 of his closest co-workers did not. And Mark started carrying this heavy, constant hum of guilt and dread that would not turn off. He would lie awake at night, his mind looping the same worry over and over. What if I am next? What if I am not good enough? What if this all falls apart? And it was his therapist, of all people, who who suggested something Mark thought sounded ridiculous at first. Talk to yourself out loud every morning for 5 minutes, like you are talking to a friend who is going through exactly what you are going through. Mark rolled his eyes. He did it anyway, mostly to prove it would not work. The first few mornings felt awkward, standing in his bathroom saying things like, "Mark, you survived something hard, and you are allowed to feel shaken by it, and that does not mean you are failing." But somewhere around week 2, something shifted. He noticed the spiral in his head, the one that used to run uninterrupted for hours, started breaking apart the moment he spoke it out loud. Saying the worry gave it edges, gave it a shape he could actually respond to instead of just drown in. By week 6, Mark was not just calmer, he was making better decisions at work, faster ones, because he was no longer wasting half his mental energy fighting an invisible fog. He had found his own coach, and it had been him the whole time. Now there is a reason this works, and it is not just comfort, it is chemistry. When you speak a thought out loud with intention, your brain activates something called the prefrontal cortex more strongly than it does with silent thought alone. This is the part of your brain responsible for planning, for reasoning, for what scientists sometimes call executive function. Basically the part of you that acts like an adult in the room. At the same time, speaking out loud tends to quiet activity in the amygdala, the small almond-shaped structure buried deep in your brain that is responsible for fear, for panic, for that flood of dread you feel before a hard conversation or a big decision. So when you talk to yourself out loud, you are literally shifting brain activity away from the panic center and toward the planning center. You are moving control from the reptile in you to the strategist in you. And this is not some vague wellness claim. This has been measured, tracked, and replicated across multiple studies on what researchers call instructional self-talk versus motivational self-talk, both of which, it turns out, work, but for different jobs. Instructional self-talk is when you talk yourself through the steps of something, like a surgeon quietly narrating an operation, or an athlete repeating the exact mechanics of a movement before executing it. Motivational self-talk is when you speak encouragement to yourself, like an internal cheerleader, and both types have been shown in controlled studies to improve performance, reduce anxiety, and increase what psychologists call self-efficacy, which is really just a fancy term for believing you are capable of doing the thing in front of you. If you have ever wondered why elite athletes mutter to themselves before a serve, before a free throw, before stepping onto a mat, it is not superstition, it is neuroscience they may not even be able to explain, but their bodies figured it out through repetition. Novak Djokovic does it. Serena Williams has done it on camera for years. Basketball players talk themselves through free throws under their breath in packed, screaming arenas because the sound of their own voice, even a whisper, cuts through the chaos and gives their brain one clean, organized instruction to follow, instead of 1,000 competing anxious signals. And here is the part that I think matters most for people who are not athletes, who are not surgeons, who are just trying to get through a regular Tuesday without feeling overwhelmed. This tool is free, it requires no equipment, no app, no subscription, and it works whether you are dealing with a job interview, a difficult conversation with your spouse, a health scare, or just the low-grade hum of anxiety that never seems to have one clear cause. The mechanism is the same no matter the size of the problem. Because the brain does not really distinguish between big stress and small stress the way we think it does, it just responds to whether the thought stays formless and looping, or whether it gets organized and given direction. There is something else here that I find almost poetic, and it goes all the way back to childhood. If you have ever watched a toddler playing alone, stacking blocks, narrating every single move out loud, this block goes here, no, this one falls down, try again, you are watching the earliest version of this exact mechanism in action. Developmental psychologists have studied this for decades, and the leading theory, first proposed by a researcher named Lev Vygotsky, is that children literally think out loud before they learn to think silently, because speech comes before internal thought, not the other way around. The private muttering voice you hear from a 5-year-old solving a puzzle is not random noise. It is the child brain literally building the scaffolding for what will eventually become silent, adult reasoning. Somewhere around age 7 or 8, most children learn to pull that voice inward, to keep it quiet, mostly because adults around them, teachers, parents, tell them to stop talking to themselves. It looks strange. And so an entire generation of us learned to suppress a tool that was, developmentally speaking, one of our very first thinking instruments. Which means when you talk to yourself out loud as an adult, you are not doing something unnatural. You are actually returning to the original, more effective version of how your brain was designed to solve problems in the first place, before the world taught you to keep it silent and hidden. There is a study out of a major university that tracked students before a difficult exam, splitting them into groups. One group sat silently and reviewed their notes in their head. Another group was instructed to speak encouraging, specific, second-person self-talk out loud for just 2 minutes before walking in, using their own name, reminding themselves what they had actually prepared and what their plan was for the first difficult question. The group that spoke out loud consistently reported lower measured anxiety walking into the room, and performed measurably better on the exam itself, not because the material in their heads had changed, but because the way their brain was accessing that material had changed. Panic makes information feel farther away, harder to retrieve, tangled. Organized spoken self-talk makes that same information feel closer, more available, easier to reach for exactly when you need it. This is the piece most people miss. We assume confidence comes from knowing more, when very often confidence comes from being able to access what you already know without your own fear getting in the way first. I want to pause here because I think some of you are wondering, does it actually matter what I say, or is this just a trick, a placebo? And that is the right question to ask. The research suggests the content absolutely matters. Vague positivity, saying something like everything is going to be fine over and over, tends to do very little and sometimes even backfires, because your brain does not believe things it cannot justify. What works far better is specific, second-person, name-based language. Instead of saying, "I am so nervous about this presentation," try saying it out loud like this. "Mark, you have prepared for this. You know this material better than anyone else in that room, and even if it is not perfect, it will be good enough." Notice the difference. It is not empty cheerleading. It is a specific, reasoned argument delivered out loud, in a voice that sounds like guidance rather than panic. This is why using your own name, and speaking as if you were advising someone else, tends to outperform simply thinking positive thoughts silently. Distance creates clarity. When you speak to yourself in the second person, your brain briefly treats the situation the way it would treat advising a friend, and we are all, without exception, wiser and calmer when the problem belongs to someone else. Talking to yourself out loud using your own name is essentially a way of tricking your brain into giving you the same clear-headed advice you would give anyone you loved, instead of the panicked noise you usually give yourself in silence. If you have been listening this far and something in you is nodding along, thinking about the last time your own head felt like a storm you could not organize, I would genuinely appreciate it if you shared this video with someone in your life who is carrying a version of that storm right now, because most people have never been told this is even an option, that their own voice could be the tool. It costs nothing to send it. Now let me get practical, because I know some of you are sitting there thinking, all right, I am convinced, but I am not about to walk around narrating my entire day out loud like a lunatic. How do I actually build this into a normal life without feeling ridiculous? Good, that is exactly the right concern, and here is how you do it. First, start small and start private. Bathroom mirror in the morning, car with the windows up, shower. These are the low-risk zones where nobody is watching and nobody is judging. Second, use your own name and speak in the second person. Not "I feel anxious," but instead your name. You are allowed to feel anxious, and you are still capable of doing this. Third, keep it short. 5 sentences is plenty. This is not a meditation retreat. It is a quick recalibration, closer to stretching a muscle than running a marathon. Fourth, do it before the moment you need it, not during the panic itself. 10 minutes before the hard conversation, 5 minutes before the interview, 1 minute before you walk into the room. That is the window where this technique does the most work, because you are organizing the thought before it has a chance to spiral. Fifth, and this one matters, do not just repeat feelings. Give yourself instructions. Tell yourself the actual next step, your name, breathe. Then open with the question you rehearsed. That is instructional self-talk, and it is often more powerful than motivational self-talk alone, because it gives your brain a job instead of just a feeling. There is one more piece of this that I find genuinely fascinating, and it has to do with loneliness, of all things. Modern life has quietly trained a lot of us to believe that needing comfort, needing reassurance, needing a calm voice telling us we are going to be okay, means we are somehow dependent, somehow weak, somehow not self-sufficient enough. And so people white-knuckle through hard days completely alone, refusing to offer themselves the exact kindness they would offer a stranger without a second thought. But researchers studying self-compassion have found some things almost the opposite of what our culture assumes. People who talk to themselves kindly, out loud, using warmth instead of harsh internal criticism, are not weaker. They recover from setbacks faster. They take more risks, because failure feels less catastrophic when you know the voice waiting for you afterward will not tear you apart. Self-criticism feels productive because it feels urgent, but urgency is not the same as usefulness. Harsh internal talk keeps the amygdala activated, keeps that fear circuit lit up, and a lit-up fear circuit is terrible at learning, terrible at creativity, terrible at trying again after a mistake. Kind out loud, instructional self-talk does the opposite. It brings the prefrontal cortex back online, and that is the part of you that actually learns, adapts, and improves. I also want to be honest about something, because I would be doing you a disservice if I pretended this fixes everything on its own. Talking to yourself out loud is a tool, not a cure. If you are dealing with persistent, overwhelming anxiety, depression, or thoughts that feel genuinely out of your control, please talk to an actual professional, a therapist, a doctor, someone trained to help you through it. This technique is not a replacement for that kind of support. It is a daily habit that strengthens the same mental muscles good therapy also strengthens. For most people, though, dealing with the normal everyday noise of modern life, the low-grade dread before a meeting, the spiral before a hard phone call, the 3 a.m. worry loop, this simple, free, 5-minute habit can quietly rewire how loud that noise gets and how much power it has over your day. So here is what I want you to do, tonight, not tomorrow, not once things calm down, not when you have more time. Tonight, stand in front of your bathroom mirror, or sit in your car in the driveway, and say your own name out loud, followed by one honest thing you are carrying right now, and then follow it with one clear, specific instruction for what you are going to do about it. That is it. 30 seconds. You will feel strange doing it, and that feeling is fine. That feeling is just your brain encountering something new. Do it again tomorrow, and the next day. Because the goal is not one perfect pep talk, the goal is building a habit so automatic that the next time your mind starts spiraling in silence, your first instinct is to bring it out into the open, into your own voice, where it can actually be organized, examined, and answered, instead of just endlessly repeated in the dark. I think this is one of those things that sounds almost too simple to matter, and that is exactly why most people never try it, and exactly why most people never get the benefit of it. The most powerful tools are rarely complicated. They are just overlooked, sitting there in plain sight, waiting for someone to actually use them on purpose instead of by accident. Your own voice has been available to you your entire life, and most of us have only ever used it to talk to other people, never realizing the person who might need to hear it most is the one standing in the mirror. If something in this video shifted how you think about your own mind even slightly, do me a favor and stick around here on Smart Psychology, because there is a lot more I want to show you about the strange hidden mechanics running underneath your everyday thoughts. Subscribe if you have not already, and share this with someone whose inner voice could use a little more kindness this week. And most importantly, do not just watch this and move on, actually try it tonight. Actually say your own name out loud and give yourself one honest instruction, because understanding this idea changes nothing on its own. Using it is what changes everything. Take care of your mind the same way you would take care of a good friend, because in the end, that is exactly what it is. I will see you in the next one.